Welcome back to Powered by Rainbows. I am so excited for this next section of our telethon here. And this section, we get to answer all of your great questions that have been coming in for the past week or so on it. So let's get started. Some of these are answered by our other co-host as well. But this first one comes from, I'm going to go from most popular to other questions. Rosite V2 asked, what are some of the lighter, best ways to come out to parents who don't support the LGBTQ&A+ community, but don't necessarily hate them? Because the signals can get very confusing. Also, thank you so much for the content you're putting out there. At first, I had some very controversial thoughts about a certain part of the community, but thanks to your educational content, I saw it on a totally different and more accepting light. So I would say some nice ways to come out. First off, we have an entire series on our channel called Coming Out Advice. If you haven't seen it already, please go watch that first. It offers you 35 tips to coming out. It offers what to prepare for after coming out. It also offers some for yourself, what to prepare for that you may not expect. It also offers some advice for homophobic and transphobic loved ones that might be around you. That series is all in a playlist on our channel. If you go to our channel and hit the playlist tab, you'll find Coming Out Advice there. But I would say some nice, easy ways to come out are to either sit down with your parents at dinner or something like that and be like, hey, I'm gay or I'm trans or whatever. It's very nerve-wracking just to say those two words to someone out loud. I know for myself, it was very, very difficult to say those words, even in the mirror to myself. And so if you're looking at this and wondering, I don't want to say those words because it's scary. I actually came out with a letter, and that way I had to write all my thoughts out beforehand. That way, even if my family wasn't accepting, I got to say what I wanted to say. I got to write it as long or as short as I wanted to. My family, in the end, said I could have just wrote 2 words on the sheet of paper and that was it. I decided to write a 6-page long thing. I rewrote that many different times. I rewrote that actually 10, 12 times. In total, I just scrapped everything, deleted it, and started over. I'm not necessarily saying that is something you have to do, but it does allow you to say the words you want to say, convey the message you want to convey, and offer maybe some supporting facts or something. For instance, if you have homophobic parents, you could say in that letter, hey, I know you have religious beliefs, but I'm still your son. I'm still your daughter. I'm still your child, and you could offer that insight to hopefully not necessarily bring them all the way across the bridge today, but to your side of the argument, but at the very least start that conversation. Or one of the really cool ways I've seen is to ask people in whatever form you're going to give them. I would love to hear your opinions. If someone starts fighting with you over it's a sin to be gay, don't just go on the defensive there and be like, no, it's not a sin in any major religion of the world, which is true. It is not a sin in any major religion of the world. Christian, Muslim, many, many others. Islamic, it is not a sin. So don't just go on the defensive with those kind of facts, because people that are so wrapped up in their own opinions don't care about facts. And so if you go on the defensive, they're going to go on the defensive, and you're never going to get anywhere. I would say start off by asking them okay, why do you feel that way? And once they explain that, why do you feel that way? Let's get to the root of why you feel a certain way, and then we can go about solving it. So I would say a letter or a note, maybe like I've seen people come out through a unique way of, I don't know, if you really like coffee or something, get a mug and paint "I'm gay" on the bottom of it or something. And when you take your sip of coffee in the morning, you're telling your partner that you're gay, or you're telling your loved one that you're gay. Find something unique that your loved one loves. Maybe if they like playing card games, hide a card in the deck that says what your gender identity is, I don't know, something like that. It could be fun. Or just play or do something that is going to invoke a certain thing. Like watch a YouTube show or watch a TV show that has a character that identifies as the same sexual orientation or gender identity that you do. And that way, hopefully you can show them firsthand in that half an hour, like, this is how normal it is. And so after that half an hour is up, or that hour-long show is up, you can tell them, hey, I'm just like that, by the way. I'm just as normal, I've seen that done too. Next question comes from Rod Marsim. Sorry, names are hard. I've kind of been wondering how can one become an LGBT activist? I've been frustrated due to lack of acceptance from family for being bisexual, and I've been seriously thinking of pursuing it. Activism comes in many forms. So for instance, for our show, activism is making a weekly TV show and being out there at Pride events and being a part of the community on the front lines. It's following legislation. It's figuring out who agrees with us, who doesn't agree with us, figuring out why they don't agree with us. For us, it's difficult. We have to follow the laws in the legislation in like all countries of the world and figure out what is happening on the ground everywhere in the world all the time, in order to do our jobs. But you could have it a lot easier. I mean, there are local LGBTQ organizations everywhere in the world that you can be a part of. And I would say research some of them. So whatever your hometown or region or state, or, province or whatever you call it, look up that region and search Google for LGBTQ rights organization in XYZ city or XYZ region. And hopefully you'll find something close by, and that way you can get involved locally. I used to be a part of a nonprofit years, like, it's weird because years and years, I should tell you this, like, years before, when I was 11, I think, years old, I started a nonprofit of my own. We noticed that a lot of like older folks in elderly care facilities, like nursing homes, assisted living centers, we noticed that a bunch of people didn't have family to visit them in their nursing home or assisted living center during the holidays. And I thought that was really sad because like my Nana loved when we came over and we visited her. And after she died, I realized like, this is what's happening across the country. There's people that live their entire life and now are being left alone for, the entire holiday season for Christmas and New Year's. And so a co-founder and I, we used to like play guitar we used to like co-direct our school choir. And like, cause I was a Catholic school boy, the whole 9 yards. But I decided, I'm like, hey, let's do something about this. So the co-founder and I decided to just start a nonprofit. So we started raising capital, and we started figuring out different places we can go, and started contacting all these elderly care facilities and asking them, like, hey, can we come and just play a little bit of music for an hour? Eventually we got 20 some schools on board with us. And so we actually went on tour and went from nursing home to nursing home every single day. We would do like 3 or 4 nursing homes a day, all December long, all day, every day. I was still in school. So when I got done school, I went to like 2 nursing homes, but my co-founder was like a little bit older than I was. And so she ended up going to like 1 or 2 during the school day, and I would do the nighttime ones. It was exhausting, but it was really rewarding. And I think like 4 or 5 years into that, we ended up like just having a ton of schools on board, a ton of nursing homes. It went far beyond us. So we no longer had to be there in person. These like schools would just have a choir director that would take on that task and do like 5 nursing homes for us or something. It expanded exponentially, because people believed in our cause and people wanted to help with what we were doing. When I got into college, I had to leave the organization because I was no longer going to be in the area. And so I left it in my co-founder's hands, and she ran it up until today. It's still running. It's called the Little Drummer Boy Christmas Concert Series. I'm very proud of that charity. But it's something where if you see a need in the world, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to join something else. You could just create your own and do your own thing, and it expands from there because people believe in what you're doing. I started Powered by Rainbows by myself in the basement of my house with a camera, and look where we are today with 30 some team members. Things grow. So I'm not saying you have to join something else. Sometimes you can see a need in the community and you can just go after that and do it yourself, until people start realizing what it is you're doing and start getting on board. Depending on your age, you might want to be involved in an organization that's bigger than you. And I would say that, we are always bringing staff members on to help volunteer and make this show. On our website, professorpride.com, or you can just look up LGBT organizations near you. You can look up a GSA club in your school, see how you can get involved. GSA club, really, I will say, if you want to start a GSA club, first off, we have an entire course on our channel here. Just look up Powered by Rainbows GSA club tips. We have an entire course for you to help you create a GSA club at your school. That really is a great way to get on the ground floor in the community of, let's start a GSA club in the school. That's school club can work with local LGBT organizations across the area and really start moving mountains locally. Or if you see a certain need, like bisexual need, like you were talking about, you can go in depth on that, and you can be an activist online. You can follow legislation that affects that. You can share things on your social media and say, this is what's happening locally. This is what's happening in my local school board, or in my state or my country, and follow that legislation and figure out exactly what affects you. I would also say you could start a blog. You can start a website. Wix.com, Wix.com. Start a blog and start talking about these things. The more writing that is done online about legislation or about what is really going on the local level, the better. I mean, a lot of times outlets like ours are too big, we are too broad across the world to really notice something that is happening in a local school board or a town. And so if you have something coming up, talk about it online and talk about it in a blog of your own, or write Facebook post about it. That gets it in the media. It gets it out in social media space and allows that to be found by bigger outlets to talk about, and hopefully bring more people to your cause and bring more people's attention to whatever's happening locally for you. So I would say that is a great way to get in on a local level. But yeah, just search for local LGBT organizations if all else fails. All right. Ooh, this is a long one. All right. Lexi Dakitten asked some more in detail explanation on what gender dysphoria feels like, and some more information on gender euphoria as a marker for figuring out if you're trans. I'm having a bit of a gender struggle lately because I get euphoria from being called he, him, and they, them, being referred to with words like son, boy, buddy, person, etc. And I feel happy when my hair is cut very short. I don't feel as happy looking at old pictures of myself with very long hair. I never ask myself what I identify as and come back with anything feminine. I get uncomfortable when I can directly see my breast, even if I'm clothed, if they don't seem flat enough. But I hear all the stories about how someone thinks they're trans mask as a teen, and I'm a teen. But when they grow older and aren't as hormonal, they realize they're just a tomboy. I hope you see this question and can answer. While it'd be probably be better to discuss with my therapist these questions, I always get too scared and end up not mentioning it. Thanks. You're right. Some of these questions are perfect for a therapist, but I will say on a general level here, what I could answer. If you feel... one thing that's important to notice about labels, our community is enthralled with labels and putting labels on everything. We come up with 95 pride flags, and we come up with, thousands of words to describe our community. And sometimes that is what contributes to the alphabet mafia kind of pushback from the far right. But with labels, I think it's important to understand that you don't have to necessarily check mark one of those boxes. There are millions of gender identities out there. There's, trillions upon trillions of orientations out there. Not all of them can be described with a word. And it's very important to notice, if you're seeing other people around you, try your best. I know it's difficult at a young age, but try your best not to compare yourself to them. They are not you. You are not them. You can go to pride events and celebrate being LGBTQ&A all together. You can celebrate being trans together. You can celebrate being who you are. That's what a pride event is about. It's not about being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and so on. It's about just celebrating who you are and who you love. And that is unique to you. No one is going to match that. And so if you're seeing people around you later identify as a tomboy or something else, it doesn't mean you're going to go down that same path, and it doesn't mean you have to. So if you feel gender euphoria, which is the excitement of being, being affirmed in your gender, then go with that. It's okay if right now you feel gender euphoria by someone calling you certain pronouns or certain nicknames or names, that's perfectly fine. If I've had similar questions before where people ask about what if right now I want people to call me Matt, and 5 years from now or something, I change that and I want to be called something else, what do I do? Like, people are always scared of the future like that. And I think it's like, if you're happy being called something right now, ask people around you to call you that. You don't have to set labels immediately. You don't have to stick by a certain name. If you're trans and you want someone to call you by a name and a pronoun set right now, and then 20, 30 years from now, you change that for some reason, then you change it. If, tomorrow you want to change that and test new names every day until you find one that you like, it's okay to do that too. Just like with this, if you're happy with people calling you a certain pronoun set or a certain name right now or nicknames, that's perfectly fine. As long as they're not, being derogatory with that, it's perfectly fine. Don't be afraid to change in the future, but don't be afraid to set certain rules now and lay the groundwork right now and say, you know what, this is what I'm happy with right now. And that's what I'm going to go with, because part of being LGBTQ is all about chasing happiness no matter what. So I would say that's the best answer there. For specific situations, maybe it is best to talk with a counselor, but just know that no matter what in that process, I think a lot of people are afraid to change their pronoun set or change how they feel about this because they're afraid others won't be affirming of their gender. And the truth is, we should always affirm your gender no matter what. So if people start not affirming that gender, that's a problem and we have to solve that. But for right now, if you're feeling gender euphoria with a certain pronoun set, go with it, and just chase happiness. All right. Oh, I hit the wrong button. X1 Art says, how can I signal to a person that I'm LGBTQIA+, if I am unsure if they are as well, or are homo-transphobic? I don't want them to know if they are the latter for obvious reasons. Love what you're doing. Have a great October. Edit, sorry I wrote this in a confusing way. I don't really know how else to phrase it. It's perfectly fine. I understand. How do you signal to other people? Well, okay, so I'm going to say, depending on your age, there's a gay handkerchief code. It's called the Hanky Code. If you ever want to learn more about it, we have videos on our channel here all about it. But the gay hanky code means you can signal to someone that you're part of the community without actually signaling to the homophobes that don't understand it. That's how they used to do it back when it was illegal to be gay, before 2003 in the United States for some freaking reason. For some reason, it took us that long to realize gay people are, valid. But I would say, maybe that's a way to do it. Other ways could be wear a small amount of rainbows. I'm not saying, as much as I want to sell merchandise and be that, salesman of go to pbrmerchstore.com. You could do that. That's a great way to signal to other people that you are LGBTQ. But it's not really subtle. There are certain t-shirts and things that you can buy on there that are somewhat subtle, but wearing this on your shirt is not really subtle. So yeah, I would say if you want to be blatant about it, then do that. But I'm saying wear a rainbow, an actual just straight out rainbow, not a rainbow flag, a rainbow, just a rainbow. Somewhere in your clothing, or put a pin on your backpack like a rainbow. That could signal to certain people that you are a member of the community without outing you either. Because if a homophobe notices that, you can always say, oh, it's just a rainbow. It's just my clothing today, I just got this shirt because I thought it was cool, especially a shirt that has a saying that's not necessarily a part of the community. you could get one of those sayings and just be like, hey, I'm going to, wear this out and about. And if someone asks, oh, it's just a cool saying on a shirt, so that's one of the ways you can do it. Signaling. I mean, you could also just be like asking people if you, for instance, if you like someone, if you're a girl and you really like someone else and you want to know if they're lesbian too, you could say to them like, hey, do you listen to Girl in Red? If you're gay and you're looking to see if someone else is gay, you could ask them, do you listen to Troye Sivan? Or do you listen to Grace and Chance? If someone is homophobic, or if someone doesn't, if someone is straight, they're not going to really know what that is, or what it means. But if they are homophobic, they probably don't know who Grace and Chance is or Girl in Red is. And even if they do, you can just say, oh, I just found this song and I thought it was cool. I'm not, you can sort of cover for things and be like, oh, I'm not gay myself. I'm just, I just found this song on Spotify or something, and you can really easily cover for it if you have to, if you don't want them to know. So there's that. That's a really cool way that I've seen happen, especially for gays and lesbians. I know bisexuals, they all have, if you're looking for artists, like you can always find an artist that's part of your orientation and ask specifically for that. Like there are asexual, there are bisexual, there are transgender artists out there. So you can always ask without asking. You can always ask someone, are you the same way, without asking them directly, are you gay? Are you lesbian? So there's always ways like that. M asked, what the A means in LGBTQ&A? Asexual, aromantic, agender? Yes. Yeah, this sounds more like a comment than a question. Just to remind those that think differently and those that don't know, just hearing the words can save a lot of heartache and not feeling broken. Thanks, much love. Yeah. So the A stands for a lot of things in that, beyond actually what you said. So A stands for asexual, aromantic, agender, aesthetic, a physical, all the, if you've seen our graphic before of the seven spectrums of orientation, all of those have an A something version of themselves. Like the sexual spectrum has asexual, the romantic one has aromantic, but all seven of them have a similar A something. So that's important to note as well. So there's actually, 8 things that the A stands for, believe it or not. So that's interesting. The 7 spectrums of attraction each have their own A abbreviation and agender, because it's the gender spectrum as well. All right. Belina asked, I was wondering how I should tell my parents that I'm agender, because they only believe there is 2 genders, and I already came out to them as lesbian, and they were super homophobic, and they said I was too young to know, but they don't say that about my brother, who is younger, because he is straight. And then they said I'm not allowed to come out as any weird, demented gender thing, and they constantly say really homophobic things to me. And whenever I wear boys' clothes and get so mad and angry and tell me that I can't wear them because it makes me look like one of those weird, messed up gender people. I'm sorry for the rant, but I really just don't know what to do or how to tell them. And thank you so much for all the amazing work you do. I really appreciate it. Well, Belina, that's a very difficult situation to be in. I wish things were better for you. Here's the thing. One of the main tips that we have from major organizations We've partnered with the Trevor Project, It Gets Better, GLAD, Glesson. We partner with all these amazing organizations over the years, and consistently all of those organizations and ours have the mentality that you should test the waters to see if it's safe to come out to someone before coming out. But if they don't accept you, here's the important part. The best analogy I can give you is a party. Coming out to someone is like a party. You're throwing a party in your house and you're inviting certain people. You're inviting your mom, your dad, you're inviting your brother, you're inviting your teacher into that party. Every time you come out to someone, you're inviting them to that party. If they choose to come to that party and celebrate with you and love you unconditionally, that is their choice. And you would love for all of them to come to your party and celebrate with you, but sadly, this world is not loving all the time. And so if they choose not to RSVP and not to come to your party, not to celebrate with you, and they choose not to accept you for being LGBTQ, it's important to know that it's not your fault they didn't come to your party. You invited them to your party. They chose to stay home. They chose to separate themselves from you. And you're letting them in on a piece of your truth. It does not make that truth any less truthful or valid by their reaction. No matter what you are, who you are, no matter what you love the way you love, they are not going to change that no matter how hard they try. But by not accepting you, they are the ones that are outcasting themselves from your life. A lot of LGBTQ people feel like it's their fault that these people don't accept them. But the truth is, it's like, you are just telling them your truth. You're just being yourself, your authentic self for the first time in your life. And they're the ones that are not accepting. They're the ones that are separating themselves from you. And this speaks to a much larger issue of internalized homophobia or internalized transphobia of immediately when you tell someone this truth and something goes wrong, you think it's your fault because you're the one that made that step and you're the one that told them your truth. In reality, it's their fault. They didn't accept that truth about you and love you unconditionally. So I would say, like I said, all the major organizations of the world, including ours, we look at it that way, of it's a party that you invited them to and they chose not to come. At the same time, I also want to mention that if they don't accept you, know that your safety is most important. So if they hint to you that they're going to send you to conversion therapy, it is time to get out of that situation and go to the police, because that is child abuse. Conversion therapy is child abuse, no matter how we look at it. And so reparative therapy, ex-gay therapy, ex-trans therapy, reintegrative therapy, whatever like that, it is all child abuse. So these places that you are called those things, most times teach you how to commit suicide more than they teach you anything about yourself. Because these therapists, they fail. No, I should say therapists in quotation marks, because most of them don't have a therapy degree. They realize after so long, after so many sessions with you or going to a camp, they realize they're not going to change who you are. They're not going to change who you love. And so when they realize that they're failing, their only option is teach this child how to off themselves, and that way they're not in the world anymore. And it's like, it baffles my mind how horrible these people think, but that is their solution to this. That is conversion therapy solution. Just have kids off themselves. It is horrendous, but it is how it works. So if your parents are hinting that, get yourself out of the situation and contact the police and, get to safety elsewhere, no matter what that means. I will also say that if your parents are abusing you in any physical way or emotional way, that's also child abuse. Also contact the police in that situation and get out. But there are also some forms where we just have to sadly live with certain situations. So if you're under 18 right now and you have parents who aren't allowing you to wear the clothing that you want to wear, or cut your hair the way that you want to cut it, as sad as it might be, first off, if you have family members that accept you, try to go live with them instead. If you have an LGBTQ relative, most people that are LGBT actually have LGBTQ relatives that they don't know about. So try to go live with them. Hopefully they'll be more accepting. If not, as sad as it might be, your safety has to come first. And I know this is going to sound horrible. This is going to sound like, the worst thing on earth to you at the time. But sometimes you have to live in that situation and put up with that until you turn 18, until you can, go out and live on your own somewhere or go to college and start being yourself. Because once you're 18, once you're living in college or whatever the situation is, or you're living on your own, your parents don't have any control over that. Your parents or your loved ones don't have any control over what you wear, don't have any control over how you cut your hair or what you do. The worst they can do to you is not show up and not be a family member. And in that case, again, they are choosing to not come to your party. They're choosing to separate themselves from you. You are not at fault here. You're not to blame. I would say, sadly, it's maybe one of those situations where you just have to live through those years, being who they want you to be, and just, offering as much pushback as you can without risking your safety. The reason why they're accepting your little brother at a younger age and not you is because your brother is straight, or at least he thinks he's straight right now. It baffles my mind. It's like, well, you're too young to know that you're lesbian, or, you're too young to know that you're gay or you're transgender, yada, yada, yada. These homophobes and these transphobes will say to no end, you are too young to know this. And then they will push a 2 or 3 year old to have a girlfriend. It's like, I know there are people in my life that, when they were like 2 or 3 years old, their parents were like, oh my God, you have a girlfriend. Oh my God. And I'm just like, the kid's 2 years old. He doesn't have a girlfriend. When you have that happens far more often than you think. And I'm not saying that it's a situation where that child might end up being straight. That's fine. But when you're so young and pushing these kids to be like, oh my God, you have a girl. That happened to me too. My mom, back when I was 2-3 years old, was like, oh my God, he has a girlfriend, just because I stood next to a girl one day in class in a photo. And I'm like, we're not boyfriend and girlfriend. I'm just standing next to her. She's a classmate. Then my mom every single Christmas would take a photo of me and this girl together every single year, because she kept saying, and actually her mom also took a photo of us every Christmas together. And so my mom and her mom are both taking photos of us every Christmas, standing next to each other, forcing me to hold my arm around her and being like, well, someday when you guys are married and have your wedding, you're going to have all these photos to look back on and be like, how cute you were soulmates from 3 years old on. And it's like, 3 years old, you're taking a photo of me. 3 years old. I don't know my sexuality yet, you know? I didn't even, because of that mentality, I didn't even know homosexuality existed, because it was just ingrained in me that straight is the only way, you know? And so eventually when I learned that homosexuality is a thing, I'm like, yes, that's me. That's the word that describes how I feel inside. I had crushes on boys for a long, long time before I heard that homosexuality and gay meant what I felt, you know? And so parents will accept a very young 2-3-year-old for being straight and push them to that because they accept being straight, compared to homosexuality, where, you know, you could be that way and it's perfectly valid. It's perfectly healthy to be gay. There's nothing wrong with it, spiritually or otherwise. But yet, for some reason, if you identify as gay as even a 20-some-year-old, it's like, no, you're too young to know that yet. It's like, I'm 20-some years old. I know what I am, you know? Like, I've figured it out over the years, you know? No thanks to you, by the way, but I figured it out. So it's sad, but I think that might be the best advice I can give, of just like, there's a reason why your parents are accepting your brother and not you. And it's not because of age. It's because of their homophobia, and it's because of their lack of education on the topic. And that's pure and simple. If someone does not accept you for being LGBTQ, it is not your fault. You are still valid. You are still perfectly fine the way you are. It is their lack of education that prevents them from accepting you. So, Ghetto Guest. Y'all have interesting names. What was the hardest thing about getting your show off the ground, and what was the greatest thing about the early years of the show? The hardest thing, hardest thing about getting the show off the ground was, honestly, right now, like, the reason why we're doing the telethon is like, we have so many great ideas, and then it's like, YouTube is just trying their best to kill us off, and trying their best to, you know, go into new markets to compete against TikTok. And it's like, before this, we've never had this problem. We've always been like, hey, we want to make something, let's just make it. And, you know, YouTube will be kind to us. YouTube sponsored us 3 years in a row now, because they liked what we do. They awarded us because we did such a great job. And now this year, all of a sudden, they're like, hey, let's just kill you off. And I think that's been the hardest part of, like, seeing a giant corporation choose who they love and who they hate, you know? And they realize that hate spreads a lot faster than love. And so they're like pushing hate groups right now. It's sad. I think that's been the hardest part of getting it off the ground, is just like dealing with the constant emails of YouTube wanting more and more content. When we want to provide a quality product in the end. And so I'm sitting there as a producer going, hey, we can make one really good episode a week. And then YouTube is like, no, we want 7, you know? It's like, that's not possible. And YouTube's like, we don't care. We want 7, you know? That's been the hardest part. It's always been a stressor. Financials have always been hard to, like, tell my team, like, hey, I know we're struggling right now, but we have to spend thousands of dollars this year so far to trademark things, copyright things. We have to hire lawyers and protect our name. We have to sue other people to get them to take videos down that call us pedophiles. we have to do all these things to protect our brand. And meanwhile, YouTube is being horrible to us. That's been difficult. I think the greatest thing about the early years, it honestly, it had nothing to do with revenue. It had nothing to do with the size of our audience. Like, when we got a milestone of 1 million views, we were like very, very excited, but it meant less to us than one night. I think it was 3 years into our show, season 3. We were doing this vigil, what we do every June 12th every year, is called Vigil for the 49. It's this 49-minute long broadcast to honor the 49 victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida on June 12th, 2016. Every year we do it without fail, because it's a way for us to not only honor those victims, but the victims of any anti-LGBTQ violence over the years in any country. It's a mega broadcast that we put together to kind of like pause the Pride June month celebration, and we pause it for one night and say, we're going to dedicate an hour of our airtime and honor those that came before, kind of, and honor the victims of the bloodshed that caused us to gain the equality that we have now. During that broadcast, like I said, it was like season 3. We really did not think that this would be a show that we would continue into like as many years as we've done now. But we sort of said, like, no, this is, after that night, it was just a premiere, I think it was. And the video was ready to go. It was 49 minutes long beforehand, and it was just premiering on YouTube. Meanwhile, 3 separate people in the comments were suicidal that night. And they commented, asked for advice from us. We gave them advice. We talked them through this. And then immediately after that broadcast was over, I broke down because I knew those 3 people were okay. I knew they had learned that our community is loving. They learned that there's a family out there who will love them unconditionally in the LGBT. And it was so sad to hear like 3 people were ready that night to take their life, and some silly YouTube show saved their life and talked them down from that edge. At the same time, I sort of said to myself, that is what this show is about. It is not about it's not about the videos we make. It's not about the, it's not about the education we're putting in schools worldwide. All of that is rewarding, don't get me wrong, and all of that is a driving force, but the main driving force, like up to that point of the show, before that night, I thought we were here just to help kids come out of the closet, and we were here to help people on that journey. After that night was over, it changed severely. Like, after that night was over, I broke down, cried for hours, and realized that is what my show is all about. It is helping kids understand how normal they are and fighting the insanity that causes them to want to take their own lives. And we are here to combat that and to help them realize they don't have to change for the world has to change for them. And that dynamic changed in a 49-minute broadcast for me. For 3 years up until that point, I had one mentality, And after 49 minutes, I had a completely different mentality going forward. That new passion, that new mentality has gotten us another 2 years. And we've kept that drive through the years to make it the show that you see today. Like every video we put out now, it means a lot more to us, and there's a new message in the back end of our team, knowing like what we have to accomplish is not just helping kids come out anymore. It is saving kids' lives. So I think that was like the greatest moment on the show so far. And then like years later, I'm sitting here going like, yeah, it's not just 3 people anymore. It's like hundreds of people we have saved. So that's kind of been surreal. Blazing Rose Ninja says, let's say you come out to one or both of your parents as trans non-binary. They acknowledge your identity, but they refuse to use your name and pronouns. If you choose to confront them about this issue, what is the best way to approach the topic? I've always said the best way to do this is just to correct them every time. Eventually it gets annoying to them to where they change, or you can just be blatantly bad to them too and see how they like it. So for instance, the first version that you should go with first here is to just correct them. For instance, okay, let's say, for complete example's sake here, let's say I told my parents that I was trans. Now, you should know I'm not a complete expert on this. There's a reason why our team has transgender people on it to help with questions like this, or episodes covering this sort of thing, because I am cisgender and there are aspects of that trans people know much better than I ever will. But let's say I tell my parents I'm transgender and I want them to call me by a different name and pronouns. So I want people to call me she, her, and the name Madeline, right? Well, if my parents decide not to call me by that name and not to use those pronouns, because they feel like, you have to understand, on their side of this, they feel like they are losing a son. People who are educated enough on this topic know they are gaining a daughter or gaining a child, or gaining a part of their child that wasn't communicated to them before, a truth about their child. A lot of transphobic parents feel like they're losing their son, their daughter, or their child. They feel like they're losing something instead of gaining something, right? And so one of the ways to combat this is to talk with them openly about it and say, I understand where you're coming from. You feel like you lost. You didn't specify which pronouns they used to use, but in that situation, I would talk to my parents and say, I understand. I'm going to meet you on your side of this argument. Rather than trying to bring you over to my side, I'm going to meet you where you are in this conversation. And I'm going to sit down with them and ask them, like, I understand. You feel like you're losing a son, but in truth, you're gaining a daughter, you know? Can you explain to me why you feel like you're losing a son, or why you don't want to use these pronouns or something? After that conversation, and trying to explain to them and answer all of their questions that they might have, I feel like it's the next step after that. If they continue to be the way they are, then every time they call you by the wrong pronouns, keep correcting them. Keep saying to them, hey, my pronouns are not he and him. Please use she and her. Please use they and them. If they say the wrong name, don't respond to it. If they're like calling you, be like, hey, Matt, like don't respond to it, because that's not your name. And once they come to you and they're like, I just called you for an hour. Like, why weren't you answering? You weren't calling me. Like, my name's Madeline. You know, call me by the proper name and I'll respond to you, you know? And if every time they say the wrong name or pronouns, you correct them over and over and over again, hopefully that will cause them to go, you know what? I'm so tired of having to be corrected that they just eventually change and they do it the proper way. Or if they continue to do it no matter what for like weeks, then it's probably time to show them a dose of their own medicine. And as weird as it is to say, just like start calling them by the wrong name, start calling them by the wrong pronouns and see how they feel, you know? And if that doesn't work, then do it excessively, you know? Keep doing all three until they just finally change. Even if you have to drag them to where they change and they come to your side of the argument, then do it. But at first, don't start off with a army approach. Don't start off with a military tactic. Start off with a, let's just have a conversation. Let's negotiate this. Let's ask you why you feel this way. Let me try to answer the questions you have, and we'll see how that goes first. If that doesn't work, we're gonna honestly be like the government. If negotiations and talks don't work, up the ante a little bit and be like, okay, so let's just not respond to you until you call me by the right name. And if that doesn't work, let's go full on military tactic of calling you by the wrong name and see how you feel about it, So don't escalate things to the extreme right away. Escalate things slowly until they realize you're not budging on this, This is who you are. This is how you feel. And that is perfectly valid. That's perfectly healthy to feel. It is their problem to solve. And you are there to help them solve it in some way. So that way it benefits you to be affirmed in your gender. Gabe D asked, oh, hey, a question for Michael. How did you meet each other and how do you meet queer people? So I'm going to have Michael answer this one.
Well, should I give them a real story about how we met? All right. So Matt and I met on Grindr, of all things. This is really not a wholesome story. So I was at a bar getting loaded, and I get a message on Grindr from Matt, and we just start talking, and then the next day he messaged me again, so I messaged him back, and things just went from there. Then we met up about maybe a week later, not even. We met for the first time, and it was pretty much went from there. Now, how do we meet other people? Well, let's see. The best way. People meet other people? Okay. The best way to do that is, I would say, pride events. You're going to meet tons of people. A lot of people that may not necessarily go to the bars, or they may not necessarily go to clubs or things like that. You're going to meet them at pride events because that's generally a more safe, less intimidating sort of environment, and that tends to make a lot of people feel better about being out in public and being able to be who they are.
One more question for you.
What?
How much do you love me?
A lot.
Adoru Himi asked, what are your thoughts on people who are saying LGBTQ&A is toxic? My opinion on this one is that all communities have their own bad and good sides. I mean, we did have a couple bad people in our past. There was an FBI director, Hoover, I believe, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the lead investigator of the FBI for the United States federal government. And he wrote a letter to a national newspaper and said, how we combat finding communist or bad things in the world is we find, how we combat this is we find homosexuals. And he compared homosexuals to pedophiles in his article, in his letter to the editor. Now, because of his position, people thought he had evidence behind it. People thought that, if J. Edgar Hoover is writing this, he's the head of the FBI. There must be some evidence and research that the FBI has that backs this claim up. So people blindly believed it, and they ran with it. The world ran with it. Ever since he wrote that letter years ago, all of a sudden people thought homosexuality was linked to pedophilia. And it never was, by the way, but people thought that. Now more than ever, and it's exponentially grown in belief since then. It never happened before that letter. You don't find any evidence of homosexuality being compared to pedophilia before that letter, which is weird. It's weird to say that because it's like, this entire belief that we're fighting now came from one letter. You think that it came from something like, I don't know, bigger than one letter to the editor. And you would hope that such a wild claim would, at least be based in some weird evidence that you could try to find, but there's no evidence, in any other argument, you'd hope that, hey, if you said that water was poisoned or something, you would hope that belief would be based in some reality or some evidence that you could try to find or track down. Nope. So I think we've had bad apples in our community before. If you look at, honestly, Caitlyn Jenner, for the trans community, a lot of what she has done has been terrible to the trans community. You have a lot of people in our own community that have done horrible things. And the funny part about it is J. Edgar Hoover, as bad as that letter was, the only reason he wrote it, he later said, was because he was homosexual himself. And so he had a gay partner who was an assistant director of the FBI that he hired just so that he can have a relationship with him and be close to him. And so they had a gay relationship for many, many years. And then afterwards, he's like, the only reason I wrote this letter linking homosexuality to pedophilia is because he didn't want people to discover himself as gay. It was internalized homophobia. I mean, one major sort of documentary movie out right now is the Jeffrey Dahmer one on Netflix, and he was gay. There's no doubt in anyone's mind what his sexuality was. But when you look at that situation, he's a bad person. He killed people. He had this horrible mentality for his entire life of, wanting to murder. And I think that does not do our community justice of like, hey, now people think that gay people are murderers. But it's not. I mean, you always have people that are going to do bad things in any community. But to deny the fact that he was gay negates a part of his life, because a lot of people, including myself, believe one of the reasons why he was conditioned to murder, especially murder gay people later in life, was because of internalized homophobia, because his parents hated the fact that he was gay and they pushed that narrative on him that he had to be straight. Even Netflix alludes to this a little bit in their documentary on him. But his parents hated the fact that he was gay. They pushed him to be straight. And so it pushed him into this world where he hated gay people because of it. He hated himself for being gay because of it. And so he went and did all these atrocious acts like murder. And And so we have bad people, we have bad apples in the community. And yet, like, the founders of many major conversion therapy camps and organizations are all gay. After years of pushing conversion therapy and pushing hundreds of thousands of kids to suicide, they have later come out in documentaries and in interviews and said they regret everything they did, and they are now happily married to their gay partners. And it's like, you pushed this idea for years that it was wrong to be gay, and then after all of that, after you realize you push how many kids to suicide, then and only then do you realize how bad it was to do what you did. And so we have bad apples in the community. There's no doubt about that. In any community, you have that. And in the straight community, you have bad people too. But I think a lot of it is caused by internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, of we are forced as children to think that these things are wrong about ourselves. And so in order to compensate for that, we push outward homophobia or transphobia to other people, or we push out bad things. And sometimes that affects other people. And I think that, is none more true than J. Edgar Hoover. But it's certainly true in other aspects too. Every community has bad apples. It's our job to accept the bad apples and say, you know what, even though J. Edgar Hoover did horrible things like that, he was still a gay man. The question becomes for us as activists, do we say that he's not even a part of our community? Or do we say, you know what, he was a part of our community, but the reasons why he did what he did was because of extreme homophobia that he faced at the time, that caused him to have internalized homophobia, that caused him to do the things he did. And so you can accept the bad apples if you look into their story and realize, why are they doing the things they're doing? And I think that's a lot more important issue to talk about. Is it offensive to use unlabeled as an identity? I've seen people use the flag and call themselves unlabeled, and others who think it's offensive and defeats the purpose of not using labels. We don't need labels, people. Like I've said many times before, we don't need labels. So the word unlabeled, I think is perfectly fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I can see how some people can be offended by it, but I also understand that our community is, again, this goes to that point of, why are people the way they are? Why do people think that's offensive? And there's a storyline here, okay? So ask the question why, and then ask the question why to the why, okay? That's really important here. So for this, why do people get offended at the word unlabeled? Well, it's because that the community thinks we need a label. Why does the community think they need a label? Why does everyone in the LGBTQ community think they need a label? Well, it's because we never fit in as children. We never felt like in school that we fit into the groups. There was no group of LGBTQ people that we fit into way back in the day. So we feel like we need a group or a niche now, or a label now, because we didn't fit in back then. Or we were made to feel like we didn't fit in back then. And so that's why we need a label now. Why didn't we fit in as children? Why wasn't there a group of LGBTQ people in school that we fit in with? And why, even now that we have GSA clubs and LGBTQ groups in school, why are those groups bullied by other people in school? Well, that's because of homophobia. People don't understand enough about our community because we don't have mandatory LGBTQ education in all public and private schools. We don't have that in our school systems. And so There are always going to be bullies who bully the LGBTQ clubs sometimes. And so all of that, again, can be traced back to education and homophobia. You know, a lot of things that you're going to deal with in life all trace back to some version of that. So using the term unlabeled, perfectly fine. I've said in our episode on how to find your gender identity, how to find your sexual orientation, I said specifically, it's perfectly fine if you don't label yourself as anything, because labels are, it's this system of like, you have to check mark a box. You don't have to check mark any box in life, okay? You can be yourself. You can be unique as you want to. You don't have to check mark a box of homosexual, homoromantic, asexual, aromantic, straight, cisgender, trans. You don't have to check mark any of these boxes in order to be a part of our community. We accept everyone as part of our community except for pedophiles. Everyone else is welcome. So it's like, to say that unlabeled is a offensive term, no. I can see why people think it's offensive, because they have a version of internalized homophobia inside of them, but it's not offensive. Another person asked, what are your thoughts on the new Italian Prime Minister? I don't know whether or not you covered this in another video. We actually didn't hear anything about that. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about the new Italian Prime Minister in the coming weeks, and we might cover it in an episode. Right now, I don't know enough about the subject to answer that one specifically. I'm sorry. I wouldn't want to be like, oh my God, the Prime Minister is amazing, and then turns out they're a homophobe or something. But we will certainly get it. It's Italy, so I imagine homophobic. I'm imagining that's why you're asking, just because I know the country. Sincerely Cinnamon asked, if I'm in a homophobic and transphobic Texas church, but someone outs me to the church, even though I'm not really out enough for that yet to happen, would they be allowed to fire my mom who works at the said church? My mom has a second job, but her main source of income is the church, so I don't want to be the reason that we suffer. I'm still too young to move out, so it would directly affect me as well. Wow, that's a hard question. Again, this is speaking to you. When you feel like you want to come out, you feel like something is going to happen. You feel like something bad is going to happen to the world around you, and it's going to crumble. I had the same feeling when I was coming out. I had night sweats and the worst nightmares you can imagine for weeks leading up to coming out. I had this dream that as soon as I came out to my family, I ran out of the house and I was chased down my street by this black mist, this black fog in the air. And it just chased me for miles and miles until I woke up and I, sweat through my clothes entirely. It was terrible. It was terrifying. But eventually I got over that feeling, and I'm like, you know what? The only way I'm going to be able to be myself someday is by telling people who I am. In that situation, currently in the United States, in Texas, it is illegal to fire someone for being gay because of this SCOTUS decision. Even churches cannot fire someone for being gay, even in Texas, because of the Supreme Court of the United States making a decision, I believe it was 2-3 years ago now, where they said, in 2020, I believe it was, they made it a conservative court decided that you cannot fire someone for being transgender or gay. Now, in your situation, that would mean they could not fire you for being gay. But Your mom is not gay, I'm supposing. And so it becomes a very touchy situation of, they can't fire you for being gay, but they might fire your mom for something else. A lot of these situations, they will find out something about you that they don't like, and they will say, oh, okay, so we just learned this about you, and so a month goes by, and they're being extra critical of you, and so now they're going to say, oh, you printed out too many sheets of paper. Now, it doesn't matter. The secretary next to you printed out double as many, but they find it a problem of you. Even though other people in your office might have done much worse things or the same thing, they fired you for whatever reason. And now it's, well, we didn't fire her because she was gay. We fired her because she printed out too many things and was wasting company money, or firing them because they misappropriated funds, or they didn't get permission to spend this dollar on this item before they spent it, even though they did it 50 times before and it was perfectly fine. Sadly, that situation has happened before, where companies and churches and organizations have found any reason they could to get rid of someone just because of some new information about them that they didn't like. And because it's not specifically for being gay or their daughter being gay or their child being gay, hey, the Supreme Court of the United States didn't rule on that specific situation yet, so they're allowed to do it. It's unfortunate. But I will say, at some point, you have to live your own life. As, consequences like that might be terrifying. You have to understand, like, back when I came out, I worked for about 30 some school districts at the time. And I thought, hey, if I come out as gay, maybe these schools won't want me to be around because they have that homophobia that homosexuality is somehow linked to pedophilia, which again, it is not. But maybe they won't let me be around kids and film musicals or concerts, or maybe they won't let me, be a part of events because they have this homophobia. It's unfortunate. We never lost a job because of it. Luckily, I came out and no one cared. Everyone kept hiring me, and I even wore rainbow face masks throughout the entire pandemic, and no one cared. I showed these schools how normal it is to be gay, and I was perfectly fine. Churches still hire me every single year, even though they know I run a TV show powered by rainbows. And it's kind of weird to know that. It hasn't affected me. It hasn't affected my dad's business. He runs a small business as well, and it hasn't affected him or his customer base, because your mom really doesn't have to tell the church. You can come out to your mom and be accepted by your mom. You never have to come out to your church. You never have to come out to homophobic people. With that analogy I gave earlier of a party, you invite certain people to the party. If you know in advance someone is homophobic or transphobic, like the church, you don't have to come out to them. They don't have to know that part of your life. You can just continue being yourself, loving the way you love, finding relationships that you want to find, and the church never has to be the wiser. So you can come out to the world and the church never finds out. And even if they do, technically speaking, they don't have a gay person working for them. They have the mom working for them. And so they might ask some hard questions to your mom if they ever found out. But to fire someone for their child being a certain way, I've never heard of that happening. That's not to say it has never happened. I've just never heard of that happening. And I've been deeply invested in LGBTQ activism for, about 10 years now. So I've never heard of that. So I wouldn't worry so much about that as much. Just, come out to the people that are going to be accepting. If you know your church isn't going to be accepting, perhaps it's time for you to individually go to a different church. Maybe your mom still works for that church, but you find a different church that is accepting, a non-denominational church. If you're looking for one, we have a list of pro-LGBTQ churches and religious institutions on our website, professorpride.com. And if you run a pro-LGBT and affirming church or religious institution, then please get in contact with us at professorpride.com. There's a form you can fill out to add your church or your organization to our list. What is Alex Snow asks, what is Mr. Nutter Butter's favorite thing to do? Eat nuts. And play with Reginald Fluffwolfers, his boyfriend. That is what he does. He loves hosting the show for Nutter News, but it's probably his favorite day on this entire earth has been swimming in nuts and being rained on by nuts in one of our episodes that we did recently. So that's probably his favorite thing to do. But his favorite thing to do is just eat nuts. And I know whenever my boyfriend and I get home from like grocery shopping, my boyfriend will like buy him a little bag of nuts and stuff, and it just makes his whole day. So he loves that, and he loves sitting around the living room here, eating dinner with us every night, and he really loves being a part of this family. Because, I mean, if you don't know his story, he came from Butler, New Jersey. He used to just go around the rubber factories in Butler, and he used to, try to find a home, and then eventually he found a home up here in Pennsylvania with Michael and I, and we adopted him, and we made his home life a lot better. So I know he loves that, and he loves meeting all of you in person. Probably, maybe his favorite thing to do is meet all of you in person at events or something. So he loves whenever we do a meet and greet, if we take him along. We recently went to New York State to the FDR Memorial Library. We also went to the walk over the Hudson, and we took him along to that trip. He loves going on long trips with us, and we went up there for the show, but he loves going along and just enjoying life and meeting new squirrels. And we came home from New York, and the next day we had a bunch of long distance calls because he made so many new friends up there. So because we were in a giant park and we just let him roam for a couple hours. Carla asks, you will have an intervention for Mr. Nutter Butters for his nut issue. No, that would be funny, but no, it's not a problem yet. He loves nuts, but he's a squirrel, so we understand. Jasper Ora says, Matt, any plans on lesbians and trans sex ed videos? If so, ETAs. Yes. We want to produce that. We want to make that happen. Well, many of you know we did a gay sex ed video for gay cisgender males years ago on the channel. That did fairly well. You loved watching that. We've heard so many comments from you saying that people came there expecting this just basic level, and then we dive into consent and aftercare and preparing and just all of these aspects that people don't think about. And it's like a full encompassing, educational resource for people. So many schools have used that episode now to teach every aspect of gay relationships, for intimate moments, I should say. So it's really rewarding to see that. We have We're in talks right now with an organization to an STD testing center to go there and film like what it's really like to get tested for STDs, and what's the worst case scenario? What if you end like the reason people fear going to get tested on a regular basis if they're sexually active, is what if I actually have an STD? What do I do about it? And so we want to interview them and ask them, like, okay, so what happens then? Like in people's mind, what is the worst case scenario and how can we combat that with education? So we want to do that. That's the next step for us. We're hoping that's going to come out this school year. But really, the hard part about that is funding. That episode would cost $200-$300 to produce. And, about a year ago when YouTube was kind to us, it was possible to produce that episode. And we should have probably produced it then. But we were like, no, we have too many good topics and too many good other great ideas to produce right now. So we can't do that at the moment. So we just sort of said, we're going to put it on the back burner. And now it's an important issue for us. Now it's risen on that level, on that list. And so now we want to produce it, but we don't have the funding. A lot of people don't know that gay sex ed video for cisgender males, everything you saw in that episode was purchased for that episode. Like, we wanted to get a sponsor. We wanted to get somewhere like adammail.com or another website to like sponsor it, or Spencer's to sponsor it, to send us like condoms, a dildo, douching equipment, the training kit. And like that episode cost a lot of money to produce because we needed those items in person to show examples and show how these things work. In the end, it cost a lot of money. And a lesbian version of it or a trans version of it cost an equal amount. And right now the funding just isn't there. So to put, like, I have a lesbian who's on our executive team who works with us all the time. She has said that she will do it for us. She will write it. She will film it with us, and I'll edit it for her. She said that she's going to do that with us, but we need the funding to get the supplies for her to do that episode. Some of you might be wondering, well, why don't we just use items that maybe we have? That's not the way things work. When you have a certain toy or item for personal use, for whatever, you don't put that on camera afterwards. Even though you clean it thoroughly, you don't put it on camera. So we have to have items that are specific for an episode that would cost money. So we want to produce those. I know they're important, but right now the funding is not there. That's one of the many great ideas we have that just cost too much at the moment to do. So hopefully this kind of telethon helps with that, and hopefully someday soon we can get the funding to do that. And then at that point I can put an ETA on when they would be produced. Right now it's just, I don't see it happening in 2022. I don't. We need sponsors. We need help. We would love for a sponsor to come on board. Like, people don't realize, like, we've had sponsors reach out to us and we were like, this would be an amazing topic, Like if we got the New York tourism board to sponsor an episode, we can go to Stonewall and produce an episode at Stonewall National Monument. If we got the adult website or something like that, like Adam Mail or Spencer's, to like sponsor an episode, we can do a lesbian sex ed video easily, because a sponsorship like that would make it possible. I will say that sponsorships for us, once you hit 100,000 subscribers, there's something called Brand Connect that YouTube enables on your channel. So YouTube would allow us to get in contact with brands a lot easier and get sponsorships a lot easier to fund our show. Weirdly, they don't care about smaller creators getting that funding. Over, 1 million subscribers, you can brands can contact you and ask if they can sponsor your videos. If you're under 100,000 subscribers, you don't get people reaching out to you asking for sponsorships. You have to reach out to them. Brand Connect is a way for you to do that easier, but they don't enable that until you hit 100,000 subscribers. And so it's like they're holding that hostage until we get 2,000 more subscribers. And it's terrible. It's like, these are things that could really help us right now and get us the funding we need to survive every single week. Even if it means we have to put a sponsor in every week's episode, that could help fund our entire production here and help us produce things like a lesbian sex ed video. But that right now is 2,000 subscribers away, and we've been held at 2,000 subscribers away from that sort of program for 4.5, 5 months now. We were on a steady growth and exponential growth, and we were going to hit 100,000 subscribers within a week. And then YouTube decided to implement new policies for YouTube Shorts, change their entire app to be more friendly to YouTube Shorts. And then suddenly we went from gaining hundreds of subscribers a day and within 5 to 6 days be at 100,000 subscribers. And then YouTube changed their app, so we only got 30 subscribers a day. And then it went to 5 subscribers a day, and then it went to 0 subscribers a day. It's like, what? So right now, to put a timeline on when those very, very expensive episodes would be produced, if you notice, you used to see very expensive episodes like that produced once a month. We would do 3 episodes that were very low cost, and we would do 1 high cost episode a month because we knew it was beneficial. We didn't care how many views it got, but we knew for the people that watched it, it was very beneficial, So for things like that, it's just such a high cost that we couldn't do it right now. Not with the way YouTube is treating us. Which is unfortunate because I know how much it's needed. Rebecca Pinella says, what are some ways to come out to extended family? Again, I think to a certain extent, a letter or, a post on Facebook or something that is cool. Extended family members, text them, maybe. That's a way to get your message across without, leaving anything out. But really, the further you get away, the less need there is to come out to them individually. A lot of times when you come out to the people very, very close to you, like friends and really close relatives and stuff, by the time you get to extended family members, it's you can just start dating, and then eventually they'll see your post on Facebook that you're in a relationship with someone of the same gender. It's perfectly fine, Really, social media is a great way to come out to those people all at once, or, just be yourself and they'll eventually catch on to it, Christopher Williams says, how did you figure out you identified as demisexual? Um, Interesting story. When I first came out at 25 years old, I told my family I was bisexual. Um, Even though I knew I was gay, I just felt like if they're still on the fence, if they don't accept me as gay, hopefully there's some false hope there in their minds that I would be with a girl still as a bisexual, and so that gave them a sense of false hope. It's now I know from research that's wrong to do, but back then I was, naive and I wasn't a part of the community as much. I didn't do as much research as I have now, so that's what I did. Then about a week later, I came out as gay to them because they realized I was only after dating guys. And then about, like 2 years later, 2 years later, I do a video on Grindr and the gay hookup culture. And in that episode, I tell people how, I'm not looking for sex on a first night of a relationship. I'm not looking for hookups. I'm looking for a long-term relationship and eventually building a relationship where we can have sex. It's a very weird part of the community where, like, just go watch that episode if you're wondering. But like Grindr and the gay hookup culture really explains it much better than I can explain here, how the community sort of operates like that. But I said in that episode that I'm looking for love first and then sex later, as part of that love relationship. Then, oh God, it was about a year after that, honestly, I produced another episode called Fun with Flags, Pride Flags and What They All Mean. I went through all the pride flags, including demisexual, and I wrote the script. I read the script like 5 times on the camera. I edited it. I put it out there. It's the second most popular episode on this channel, And then about a year after that, someone commented and said, I watched your Pride Flags episode and I watched this episode, and it's so good to hear there's another demisexual out there that's public about being demisexual. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never told people I'm demisexual. I had to go back to the episode to look up what it meant, because there's so many terms that I don't even remember every single one by heart. And so I go back and I'm like, wait a minute. That person was right. Like, I am demisexual, Like, it honestly took 2 episodes a year apart from each other for the information to get out there, and then for a fan of ours to comment and put it all together for me and be like, oh, you're demisexual too. And I'm like, oh my God, that is what I am. That's the term, So even for someone like me, who's like a LGBTQ professor full time, like, putting labels on things is not something I did, or realized I wanted to do. And so I didn't even find my label until years later. And so eventually I made beginning of season 4, I want to say, I made an episode called Coming Out Again, Demisexual Gay. And so that was finally when I had a label for what I was, and finally, told people publicly. So that was, it's kind of a weird journey, but it's like, even for me as an LGBT professor, it takes a while to find your label. If you're looking for it, or to find out what you would be called. Carla asked, there's a Twitch streamer called EastX Twitch. He does not understand why used pronouns they or them. He thinks in a group of people. I explained to him that some people don't feel the label either male or female fit them, so they don't use he, him, or she, her, and want to use something else. He's a high school English teacher, by the way. I think the best way is to just educate a person and just explain to them, like, this is how you feel. The best part of, if you're on a debate team, you'll probably already know this, but the best way to debate someone is to meet them on their playing field, on their ground, and ask them questions. And every time they answer a question of why they feel the way they do, explain to them slowly why you feel the way you do, or explain to them why that is. Why do they feel the way they feel? So, for instance, for the English teacher streamer, it's like, ask them, well, why do you only think that people can identify as he, him, or she, hers? And then once they explain, okay, so because you believe there's only two genders, or you believe these pronoun sets are how things work, that, you're an English teacher, so you think phonetically that they and them as a group of people. It's like, no, you can describe someone individually as that. A great way to explain it is, for instance, when I'm talking about a friend of mine, and I start talking about, Kim went to the movies the other day, and she saw Bullet Train movie. And she really enjoyed it. She laughed all the way through. And her husband, had a great time for their anniversary going to the movies. It would be really boring if I constantly said, Kim went to the movie, Kim saw Bullet Train, Kim and her husband did this, Kim did this, Kim laughed all the way through. It would be really boring if I kept saying that repetitively. So sometimes in that conversation, I would say, Kim went to the movie. They saw Bullet Train. It's like, I'm not describing a group of people. I'm describing one person, Kim. But because I'm talking a whole paragraph about that experience for her, sometimes I switch it up and don't say the name Kim. Don't say she or her. Sometimes I'm saying they, or they went here, or they went to the park, or they went to the movie. So you're already using these pronouns interchangeably. It's just an N for a singular person. But, so for some reason people are refusing to say that to a trans person because it's a trans person and they're transphobic. That's the only reason. Getting to the root of why someone refuses to call someone by a different pronoun is you already do all of this every single day for other people, but because a certain person is trans, you refuse to do it. Why? Why do you refuse to do it, to use the proper pronouns or name for someone specifically? Oh, wait, it's because they're trans and you're transphobic. So, I would say just meet them where they are and educate them. Speedy says, I am new to the LGBTQ community. How can I come out to myself? I honestly came out to myself in a mirror one day. I sat in front of the mirror and I kept trying to say those words out loud to myself. After I went on a movie set and as part of my career, and there was this actor who was working on the film, and him and I were flirting like crazy throughout the night. And I wanted terribly to spend the night with him. I ended up not doing that because it went against my morals, but I was I really wanted to spend the night with him. I really wanted to be with him. And why was I flirting with him? And I kept trying to figure it out. And so the next day I sat in front of my mirror and I'm like, you know what? It's time to put up or shut up. This is who I am. And so eventually I just sat in front of the mirror and I'm trying my best for hours to say the words I'm gay out loud to myself. No one else was home. And I spent a couple hours figuring things out, and I eventually just said it in the mirror to myself. And I'm like, I'm gay. This is who I am. And as soon as I said it, I broke down, and I'm like, oh my God, I just said that out loud. But I didn't break down out of sadness. I broke down out of happiness that, like, this is who I am. And I finally said it, you know? I finally got the words out, you know? And the next 6 months of my life, I decided to test out the theory. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to look at guys whenever I want to look at them. I'm going to, you know, fantasize about being with guys as much as I want to. I'm not going to hide that part of myself anymore. I'm not going to deny those fantasies whenever I come across them. And I let it run with it. And I'm like, eventually, like 6 months into it, my sister ended up saying to me, like, you know what I just realized? You're smiling for like the first time in your life. You're smiling more than you've ever smiled before. Like, what's going on? Like, are you dating someone that we don't know about? Are you like, did you get a job that we don't know about? Like, what's happening? And I'm like, I can't tell you yet, but it's good, you know? And so when it came out to her, she finally understood. And she's like, that's why you were smiling for like 6 months all of a sudden. And I'm like, yeah, that's why, you know? So it was really exciting. But honestly, coming out to yourself is the hardest part. Coming out to other people is easier than coming out to yourself. But yeah, even saying those words to yourself, it's in the mirror. It's terrifying, but it's like, whew, I got the words out and this is who I am, you know? How do you expose homophobic or transphobic parents? Honestly, by letting them be themselves and letting them talk as much as they want to talk. If you want to expose homophobic or transphobic people, especially their more dumb theories about our community, just let them ramble. Let them, you know, quote unquote, let them lead out enough rope to hang themselves, kind of thing, you know? Eventually, homophobic or transphobic people will say something dumb enough that they just expose themselves for being who they are, for being homophobic and hateful. But just let them go and let them roam is the best way to expose them. And just be ready with a couple debunks. Like, we have an episode, 40 ways to 40 homophobic arguments you can debunk on our channel, or debunking the top 40 anti-LGBTQ arguments. That's an episode of ours. You might want to watch it, and it would help you not just expose these homophobes, but to sort of make the world aware and make them aware of how dumb they sound. Sunset Nutrix asks, how does being both non-binary and trans work? I don't really understand that. So non-binary just means you are not part of the binary world that people believe in, like male and female. You can be androgynous, you can be non-binary, you can be agender, you can be anywhere on this giant circle and of gender spectrum besides male or female. If you are not in those two binary check marks boxes, and if you are anywhere else on that spectrum, you are non-binary because you are not in one of those check boxes. You are not part of the binary world that people believe in. And trans means you are not the gender that was assigned to you at birth. So if you have a penis and you were assigned male at birth, but you feel like you are agender, which means you don't have a gender. If you feel like you are feminine because of how you feel inside, then you are technically trans. So basically, non-binary means not male or female. Trans means anything but the gender you were assigned at birth. For example, if you have a penis and you were assigned male at birth, you could later identify as female, non-binary, agender, anywhere on that spectrum, including female. And so that means trans, because your actual gender is different than your sex assigned at birth, okay? Whereas non-binary just means you're not a part of those two boxes. Basically, non-binary means you're not male or female. Trans means you're anywhere on that spectrum besides the place that you were assigned at birth, but it can include male or female. So that's one way to describe it. And Slime Boy asked, why did you start this YouTube channel? I started this because I was at a Pride event in Washington, D.C. with my best friend. It was my first ever Pride event. We were going to see Troye Sivan perform that evening. And the entire day I noticed all these kids were around. All these parents wore shirts of, my child is gay and I'm proud. My child is trans and I'm proud. And it was just surreal to feel this way. To see all this happening before your eyes of like these kids. This is my first ever Pride event that I'm going to. I only came out 6 months before that. And I came out at 25 years old, and these kids are at their first Pride event at like 12, 13 years old, like it's incredible to think that they're starting their journey much, much earlier in life. So hopefully they can, find the love of their life earlier. They can, celebrate more of their life and be happy rather than be, have depression for more of their life like I did, and be in the closet. And so I felt really good for these kids. And that night I broke down because I came out to the world publicly that night. Before this, I only came out to a handful of other people. That night I decided to come out to the world, and I was like, to hell with it. This is who I am. I don't care anymore. I'm going to publicly be myself, On the ride home from that, it was about 4 or 5 hour trip home that night. Or sorry, the next day, because we got a hotel for the night. I was with my best friend at the time. And she fell asleep on the way home. I drove for, 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours or some of that. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, the only reason I came out was because I saw people on YouTube telling their coming out stories and being their authentic selves. And it showed me that I wasn't alone in how I felt. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make a coming out video. As soon as I get home, I'm going to make a coming out video. And I'm going to make it, because I didn't want to post it on my company channel because I didn't want potential clients to see that video and not hire me because I was gay. I was still a little bit afraid of it. I'm like, you know what? I am who I am, but I don't need it on my company channel for my company, Madhousen Productions. I was afraid. Nowadays, I'm like, no, this is openly who I am. And I post gay stuff on my company channel all the time. And I don't really care. If someone doesn't agree, they don't have to hire me, And I openly say on my company website, we support the Trevor Project charity. We support Powered by Rainbows. This is one of our TV shows. Like, we're open about who we are now. But this is like the beginning stages of coming out still. And so I decided to make another YouTube channel just for this episode. Just for this video coming out. And a lot of gay people do that at first. So I created this channel and I'm like, why not call it Powered by Rainbows? Like, we are empowered and protected by the rainbows. I was thinking, I'm like, the community really protected me before coming out. They helped me on this journey. The community, the LGBTQ, was super nice to me in that process and understanding I didn't need to come out right away. I can take my time, They were really understanding. And so I'm like, really, I was protected by the rainbows of the community and I was powered by them, So I'm like, again, I had hours while my friend was asleep in the passenger seat. So I'm like, let me just think of a name here. So eventually I came up with Powered by Rainbows. Powered and Protected by Rainbows. But I'm like, that's too long of a name for a channel, so I'll just call the channel Powered by Rainbows, and then in every episode I'll say Powered and Protected by Rainbows, you know? And so I came out with a coming out video, and in September we created the channel officially, and I uploaded the first ever episode, and then the first, we recorded 10 episodes to begin with. I'm like, I want to do a coming out video where I tell you my story. I want to do an episode on coming out advice. What advice do I have now that I'm out of the closet fully? You know, what advice do I have for you after you come out? Because I knew a lot of YouTubers didn't really cover that. I want to do like top gay movies you can see in theaters right now. And a couple others like that, where I was like, it's generic, but it's what I want to do. And I want to help a couple people. The original thought process behind it was, I want to help just one kid out there, one kid watching, come out of the closet easier than I did. Hopefully sooner than I did in their life, but easier than I did. I wanted to make that process easy for someone else, because I knew how hard it was for me. And so created the channel, uploaded the first video. Then December came. This is 6 months after we had the thought to do it at all. One of my family members said to me, like, hey, by the way, are you trying to be the next big face of gay? Like, are you trying to be popular just by being gay, you know, and be the superstar of gay world? And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to help one kid come out easier than I had it. That's the whole reason. And I'm like, have you seen my subscriber count? I'm like at 0 right now, you know? I'm only getting like 10 views, you know? I'm like, I don't even know if I'm helping anybody yet, because nobody's commenting, you know? So like, I'm not trying to be popular by being gay. I'm just trying to help someone out there be themselves easier, you know? From a perspective of someone who's gone through that journey the hard way, you know? And then with that challenge, I decided, you know what? They asked me, and they're like, you know, honestly, one of the things as part of that conversation, they said, one of the things I don't understand about the community is they have so many different pride flags. Like, what in the world do all of these flags mean? Why do you need this many flags, you know? And so I'm like, let's make an episode about it. Let's talk about it. And so we created an episode called Pride Flags and What They All Mean. It ended up getting over 1 million views eventually, and getting sponsored by YouTube a couple times. But at the time, I'm just like, let's make a fun little video about flags, you know? Then immediately after that, we were like, I just created another couple of videos when I could, however often I wanted. We talked about news, anything to just make a video. I realized how much fun I was having making these videos, and realized how much fun it was talking about the community and researching different aspects of our community. It was just fascinating for me. I always tell people, one of the most fun things I do in life is like research and read government reports, read survey results. It's just fascinating for me. It's weird, but I'm a man that loves data, you know? I love diving into research and reports and data and evidence. And I'm like, it's the best feeling in the world, like to go after a topic and like find that piece of evidence that is hidden on page 50 of a, you know, of a long government report that's just paragraphs long. And you're just like, to find that piece of evidence is just so rewarding for me. So that's what drove me to create more and more episodes. Then I was like, we're going to do season 2 all that year long. Our seasons are 1 year in length. So I'm like, I'm going to do as many videos as I possibly can. But then after that, after December, this channel has to end, you know? Season 2 is going to be it. That's it. No more episodes. We're done. We've helped a couple people. We accomplished our goal. That's it. And then I decided I'm going to end the entire show with an episode about my uncle, who was a gay man as well. And I'm going to talk about how his life compared to mine, because in his generation, you could not be gay publicly, and it was illegal to be gay back then. And I'm living in a time when I can be out of the closet and public and making videos about it, you know? And so I was like, I'm going to make an episode about that, about him and his experiences. And then I go into uh, production on that, and my mom, who has not been a part of my life ever, has, sort of, left us when I was 18 years old, missed my birthday party to get divorce papers signed because she didn't want to pay child support, wanted both of her kids to commit suicide, hated both of us with a passion. She decided to enter my life again, and she says to me, if you make an episode about her brother, who was my uncle, then she's going to sue me. And I'm like, for what? What are you going to sue me on? So she challenges me, and she's like, you can't make an episode about your uncle because we don't want you bad mouthing his name. I'm like, it's a show called Powered by Rainbows. It's talking about how positive the community is and how amazing the LGBTQ community is. In what world do you think I'm going to make an episode about my gay uncle without saying it's a good thing? In what world do you think I'm going to make an episode about him being gay and say that it's bad? Because I would never say that about any gay person, Like, what? So I'm like, all right, fine. I have all the evidence and interviews with people to prove that he was gay in his life. So I'm not going to put this episode out when you think I'm going to put it out. So we decided to cancel the very last episode of that year. And I decided to do more interviews, more research. And I reach out to a museum that actually has his yearbook on file. I go there in person. I can get all of this evidence from his life from this museum. And, it was a tiny little historical society museum in this tiny little town in Pennsylvania. We drove a long way to get there, but I get all this evidence and I come back with it, and we decide, even though the final episode, the finale of what was supposed to be Powered by Rainbows was canceled, I decide season 3 is in that moment we decide we're not just going to make an episode about my uncle anymore. We're going to make a full-on feature-length documentary all about him. And we're going to double down on it just to spite my mom for trying to silence us and trying to control our content, and for thinking that we were somehow going to badmouth him for being gay, even though we have endless evidence on our channel of gay positivity. For some reason, she thought it was, bad. So we make a feature-length documentary, and we decide in that moment we're going to create season 3. So season 3 only happened because of my mom challenging us and saying we couldn't do something that we knew we could. So that's why it happened. And then season 3 is when we got sponsored by YouTube and got pushed out to hit our first 1,000 subscribers in June, 10,000 by the end of June. And from there, we just knew we had to continue no matter what. So that is how the show got started. That's how we got rolling. And it's still why we operate today. We still have that mentality of we want to help just one kid out there at a time. Years ago, it was simply put, we want to help one kid come out of the closet easier than I did. Now it's a system where we've helped 7 million kids. So we're sort of the mindset now that we're just helping one kid at a time until we help them all, So that's why we started. And that's still the driving force behind us. So that is all the questions that you guys submitted in the past couple days here. If we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. That was literally every question that I could find on that post. If you want to be featured in future Q&A episodes, we do them pretty often on the channel, so keep a lookout on our community tab. Also, I will say here, one of the greatest ways that you can support us is by becoming a member of our channel, by hitting join down below or going to our Patreon page. You can sign up for the same exact membership levels as you can sign up here on YouTube, but on Patreon, we get a higher percentage of the support that you give us. YouTube takes a large cut, I should say, of every dollar you give us. So by becoming a member on the base level, you get your name listed in the credits of every episode at the very end. And if you become level 2, which is the first level is called Rainbow Egghead. If you become an what is it? What is it called? What is the second level of our membership called? I completely forget. How did I forget this? Anyway, so yeah, our first level is Rainbow Eggheads, which is $1 a month or higher. Then we have Pride students that are $5 a month. All Pride students and above get access behind the scenes. You get every single week. You get bloopers and outtakes from every episode. You get videos sent to you every week. At the same time we're posting regular episodes on the channel, we're posting a behind the scenes and bloopers episode to accompany that. So you get to see all the bloopers, outtakes, the funny moments from an episode being made. You get to see that in an accompanying episode on the memberships tab. And then finally at $10 a month, we have LGBTQ All-Stars. They get exclusive benefits like getting exclusive discounts on all of our merchandise at pbrmerchstore.com. They get a bunch more perks than everyone else because they're paying a little bit higher. But those same perks exist on Patreon as well at the same tiers. So if you become a member today, you get to see exclusive behind the scenes content, bloopers, and you get your name listed at the end credits of every single episode on our end screen. So we highly encourage you to do that. That's one of the best ways to support what we're doing, and on a continued basis, support what we're doing every single week here, providing weekly LGBTQ education and resources to millions of viewers worldwide. And now we're going to go to another host or somewhere else, I'm told by the producers. So I hope you're enjoying our telethon so far, and I hope you're enjoying our Q&A session here as well. We love hearing your questions, and I love answering them. I love helping as much as I possibly can, no matter the situation. So thank you for sending your questions, and we will get back to another host now.